We're in Galatians chapter 1. Galatians chapter 1. We left off, we've been discussing verses 6 and 7 for a couple of weeks. We spent most of last week making application of what Paul is describing. Of course, let's read verses 6 and 7 and just refresh our minds, and then I'm not going to spend the whole class talking about 6 and 7 again, okay? Let's refresh our minds of what Paul's saying, and then we'll go into in the couple of following verses here. Galatians 1, verses 6 and 7, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him that called you unto the grace of Christ unto another gospel, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. Now, in the immediate context, what is this other gospel that's not another that these people in Galatia had gone back to? Say again? I thought somebody said something, I didn't. The old law, exactly. The law of Moses. The teachings of Judaism were being brought in. As Paul had established his congregation, taught many people, and this, not this congregation, but Galatia's a region, multiple congregations. But he had taught them, converted them to Christ. They were Christians, and now the teachings of Judaism are being brought in to those Christians, and they were going back to it. At least many were. And Paul says, I marvel that you're so soon removed from Christ, the one who called you out of sin, to another gospel, a different gospel, which is not the same. It's not where your hope is. There's other teaching. And he describes how there are some that trouble them and confusing them, bringing in these different teachings. And he says, I marvel that you're so soon removed. I'm shocked that you would be deceived by this. And as we just said, the immediate context is Judaism was being brought in. But there's an application here to any teaching that is different from the New Testament gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a different gospel. It's not the same. Don't be deceived by it. And we spent last week describing so many different teachings that are present today, whether it's a different system of salvation than what the Bible teaches, whether it's a different method of worship from what the Bible teaches, whether it's a different concept of the New Testament church than what the Bible teaches, or we even described some who are taking things that the Bible describes as sinful and saying, well, that's not a problem. It's not a problem for someone who's claiming to be a Christian to be engaged in things like this, whether it's, lying's not a big deal, or the growing trend today is things dealing with homosexuality and all the things that go along with it. People are now beginning to, those who claim Christianity are saying, well, it's not sinful anymore. They used to teach it was. The Bible hasn't changed, though. Immodesty, alcohol, drinking. We discussed all these things last week, how things that are sinful are now being taught, even accepted by those who are claiming Christianity, as there's no problem with those things anymore. But the Bible hasn't changed. The gospel has not changed. All these concepts are another gospel that's not the same. There's applications to all of that in what Paul is saying here. Now, let's continue into verses 8 and 9 and notice the very, very severe warning that Paul gives. Galatians 1, verses 8 and 9. But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. As we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you than that ye have received, let him be accursed. Very severe warning, severe consequences being placed on those who would teach another gospel, a different gospel that's different from what Paul had delivered them by inspiration. First of all, let's jump to the end of the verse. I want to notice this word accursed. We'll back up and notice what else Paul says here, but jump to the end of the verse. He says, let him be accursed. What does that word accursed mean? Well, it's the word, first of all, it's identified, the Greek literally says anathema. That might be a word that you've heard before. Sometimes you'll hear references to that term, anathema. What does this word anathema or accursed mean? It carries the idea of something being yielded up to the wrath of God. Anathema. Surrendered to the curse placed upon it by God. It is accursed. It is anathema. And this is the strongest form of condemnation. Does God take this very seriously? Yes, He does. And remember what He's talking about. He's talking about teaching or giving ourselves to another gospel that's not what Christ established. And that can be done as the Galatians were here doing it by going back to a system that was no longer in place because Christ fulfilled it and He established a new covenant. So they were accursed, they were anathema because they were either teaching or going back to accepting the teaching of a system that was no longer in place. God had established the system of Judaism. He made a covenant with the Jews for the purpose of bringing the Messiah. But then when Jesus, the Messiah, came, He fulfilled that covenant. And that system of Judaism was no longer in effect. Jesus completed it and established the new covenant Christianity, the church. So they were guilty of this and were anathema, accursed because of their going back to that old system that was no longer in effect. But it could also be applied, as we were describing just a few moments ago, by adhering to a teaching or promoting a teaching that was never given by God in the first place. See, Judaism was given by God. Now, they had changed it and brought in their own traditions, and we're not getting into all that. But He had established that system, that covenant with the Jews. But what about when we today begin adhering to a teaching or promoting a teaching that God never gave in the first place? Would that not be applicable to this warning of anathema, of being accursed as well? Now, and there's different ways that you can adhere or promote a teaching that's not in the Scripture. In other words, there's different ways you could recognize something as not being what Christ established. Two ways. Either you add something to and make a stricter law than God has, than the new covenant has given, or you take something away from it and make it not quite as strict. And people do both. When we add something to God's Word or we take something away from it, we now have that different gospel, that different teaching that's not the same. And He says, let him be accursed if you are teaching that other gospel. And the implication would be those who are adhering to it, those who place their faith in it, they're in the same situation. Yes, ma'am. And that's a big part of the problem, Brent, it really is, because the vast majority of even those in the religious world, even those who claim Christianity, they don't know the measuring stick. They don't know the standard. And that's a serious, serious problem. Yeah. Right. Right. And he takes his standard very seriously. And that's being described here. And you could, as you read through even the Old Testament accounts, he takes his standard very, very seriously. Some of his examples, like Nadab and Abihu. They took strange fire to offer a sacrifice to God that God had never commanded. Did God say, all right, it's no problem, no big deal? He didn't say that, did he? He gave it specific instructions, and they were struck dead. Yes. And, and, and we studied through Judges even, and how they would forget God and begin drifting away and begin worshiping idols. What happened to them? God allowed other nations to bring in and oppress them, and the purpose of it was to remind them who God is. And then when they would repent, He would bring a judge, bring a deliverer, and they would be free. And again, but soon enough, they would go back and do it again. It doesn't tolerate it. Sin is very serious to God. And who sets the standard for what sin is? It's not us. God does. It's not up for us to decide. It's God's standard. And so many people question that. And first of all, He's God. It's not up for debate. He's the authority. But second of all, there are reasons that certain things are sin. And as you begin studying things, it's for our own good that He's made these standards. Live a better life, and be better people, better citizens, more productive, and all these things when we live by God's standard. Very good points. Thank you. But Paul is preaching. He had brought into the region of Galatia and all these different cities and churches. He had brought in the gospel, and he's striving to get these brethren to go back to what he taught them. And he's describing. Now remember, the message that Paul taught was not the true gospel just because he preached it. It's not, well, this is what I brought you, so it's the truth. No. As he'll even say this directly, and you get down a little bit further, just a couple more verses. But what Paul preached was the true gospel because Christ delivered it to him Himself. His message was that which Christ established. It wasn't just because this is what Paul said. But Paul was an inspired apostle, and he was delivering what Christ established. So it needed to be adhered to. And any teaching different from what he had brought them by inspiration, it needed to be rejected because it was a different gospel, a different message than what Christ Himself had established. It's the message, it's not the messenger. It wasn't simply because Paul had been there and taught them. No, it was the message. It was the true gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what's important. And Paul, kind of back up to the beginning of the verse now. Paul places this curse on any angel, even he himself, or one of his co-workers, or Paul's close friends, whoever, though we, that would encompass Paul himself, or those he's working with, or his friends, or whoever, or even an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel unto you, let him be accursed. Any other gospel than what we've already delivered to you by inspiration. Again, not because Paul said so, but because what Paul was teaching them was inspired of God and what Christ himself established. Don't add to this message or take away from it. Absolutely. The warning is, lest your name will be removed, right? And that's essentially the same thing as what Paul's saying here. It's just a different, out of the book of life. Yeah. But you know, it's interesting that some of the false teachings and false systems of religion that exist today, the people that started those claim to have received a message from an angel or something like that. But what does Paul say right here? He even specifically says, even if an angel himself delivers a different message, that angel's accursed. No one has the authority to teach something different from what Christ established in the new covenant. The gospel, the good news, that's what gospel means. Good news of Jesus Christ. I mean, you picture it. I mean, if an angel came and descended into this room right now and began preaching a different method of salvation from what the Bible teaches, a different method of worship, Paul says he's accursed. Paul's writing by inspiration and says that angel's accursed. He doesn't have the authority to do that. Questions, comments? Absolutely. So all of us must believe and teach what Paul preached, again, not because Paul said so, but because Paul was preaching the true gospel. He was inspired to do it. But if we don't adhere to it, we're under this curse, anathema, that Paul's describing here. Anyone who changes this gospel, let him be accursed, anathema, under the wrath of God. And let's back up a moment and ask why. Why so strong a curse? Why would Paul say it so strongly, let him be accursed? Well, think about the implications of this. Put it in its immediate context. Again, the problem here was they were going back to Judaism, or at least portions of it, and believing that's where their salvation was, rather than in Jesus Christ. Think about that for a moment, and think about the implications of it. If the old law, that is the law of Moses, the system of Judaism, if that old law was still in force when Paul wrote this, what does that mean for Jesus? What does that mean about Jesus? That he died in vain. That he was not really the Messiah. If the Old Testament system, the law of Moses, the Judaism, if that was still in effect when Paul wrote this, that means that the Messianic age had not come yet. Because it was prophesied throughout the Old Testament that the Messiah would come and there would be a new and better way. Throughout the Old Testament, that's prophesied about the coming kingdom and so forth. That means if the system of Judaism was still in effect when Paul wrote this, that means the Messianic time had not come yet. And if the Messianic time had not come yet, then Jesus was a fraud. That's what that meant. That means he was not the Messiah as he claimed. And that means he was a heretic because he was claiming to be that. He said those prophecies spoke of him. So if the Messianic time had not yet come, Jesus was a heretic. He was a fraud. That's how strong. That's why Paul is speaking so strongly against this. If you deny the good news of Jesus Christ, you're teaching something different, you are in direct denial of Jesus Christ Himself. And that's cause for anathema, being cursed of God. Because God had planned the Messiah through Jesus Christ. He planned the church through Jesus Christ from before time began. You think about Ephesians 3, verses 9 through 11. This was the church was in the plan of God through Jesus Christ from eternity. That means before time began, before the creation occurred. And now to reject that and say, no, we're not, the Messianic time has not come yet. Jesus is not who He claimed to be. Paul says, let him be accursed. Let him be anathema. Questions, comments? Going into verse 9. As we said before, so say I now again. Pause there. How many times does God have to say something to make it authoritative? Well, just once, right? But here He's repeating. This is serious. He's repeating Himself. Pay attention. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. And He's even called them His children. He views them. He taught them. He brought them to the truth. He taught them the gospel. He views them as His children in the faith, and they are, in a sense. And you're right. In His writings, He does sound like, I've told you this already. How many times do I have to say it? Don't make me pull this car over. That sort of thing. Obviously not pulling a car over, but you get the idea. But He's repeating Himself now. Pay attention. He's emphasizing this. You better get it, He says. Don't miss it. Don't miss the seriousness of this. The gospel, as I said a moment ago, is the good news of Jesus and what Jesus did for sinners. He came as the Messiah to become the sin bearer, the sin offering. Don't deny that. Apart from the cross, if you don't have the cross and Jesus, the crucifixion and His death, burial, and resurrection, you don't have a gospel. You don't have any good news. So don't deny it. Don't go back to something that Jesus fulfilled. Don't deny Him as the Messiah. Remember what Paul wrote in Romans 1, verses 16 and 17. Y'all know this passage. The gospel is what? The power of God. For what? Salvation. Now, put that together with what I just said. The good news of Jesus, the gospel, is God's power to save. If we deny Jesus, deny what the Messiah did, then we don't have salvation, because the gospel is God's power to save. Don't deny the good news of Jesus, else you don't have salvation. You're denying God's power to save you. If you deny Jesus as the Messiah, bringing the good news. Questions, comments? But Paul, he cares about these people deeply. These are his friends, as we just described it with Ms. Dana a minute ago. He views them as his children in the faith. He taught them. He knows them. And he's deeply concerned about them. He loves them because they are in danger of facing God's wrath. Now, he sounds harsh with them, but he's saying this because he loves them. Just like that parent who is applying discipline. It might sound harsh with their children sometimes. They care about them. They love them. They want them to get their lives on the right standard. Questions, comments? Yeah. 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 It can be disheartening when you try and and folks, they don't care as much as you do about getting their life right with the Lord. And that's, some people might not read what Paul's saying here, or some of these brethren in Galatia might, man, he's mean, he's harsh. But he's saying this because he cares. He wants them to make the corrections because they're in danger. They're in eternal danger. Look with me at verse 10. For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. Pause there with me. Think about what Paul's saying. First of all, let's note the word persuade. For do I now persuade men or God? This word persuade, it's not used in exact, yes, it's very much connected with the way we use the word persuade, but it's not exactly the same as the way we use the word. It actually carries the meaning of, do I seek the favor of men or God? Do I seek approval from men or from God? That's an interesting question. Because when we're teaching something that is not what God said, but people might like it, whose favor are we seeking? It's not God's, is it? That's seeking the favor of men. That's seeking approval from men. Paul obviously made a choice that he's going to seek the favor of God. He's not going to speak things and teach things just to please men. He wants to be pleasing to God, to seek God's favor, to seek His approval. He was declaring God's truth. And again, he might sound harsh as he's holding this hard line against what some of the people in Galatia were doing. It might sound harsh in doing that, but he is declaring God's truth no matter the effect that it has on his personal relationship with them. He loves them. He wants to have a close relationship with them. He loves them dearly. But he is going to hold God's standard regardless of what their reaction is going to be and what that does to their relationship with him. That's difficult sometimes. When we know God's truth can change our relationship with somebody, but holding God's truth anyway, that can be difficult sometimes. But do we seek to persuade or seek approval of men or God? We can ask that a different way. Go ahead, Ms. Dana, before I say that. Go ahead. Persuade? Mm. Interesting. Interesting. Mm-hmm. seek approval or something like that? Or seek favor? Yeah. Absolutely. Let's ask the question that I asked a moment ago, but ask it a different way. And in other words, do I seek approval of God or men, or what means more to it? Let's ask it like this: What matters more to us? This temporary life on this temporary earth, or where we're going to be eternally? Eternal life or eternal consequences. What matters more to us? Now, it's easy to say, well, eternity matters more. And we know that, we can easily see that, but what do our lives reflect? Do we live for right now in this world, or do we live for eternity? Because the way we live really is what shows what matters most to us. It's not just a matter of saying, yes, eternity is more important. Obviously it is. But do our lives reflect that reality? Don't seek to please men in this world. Be a people pleaser in this world. Seek to please God. Seek to please Him now in this life, and then please Him in eternity as well. And of course, connected and joined together, it's impossible to separate these two thoughts. Seek to please God now and eternally, but also, of course, seek to help others to do the same. Help others recognize eternity versus this temporary world in which we live. Now, does that mean it's wrong to enjoy this life? And no, that's not the point at all. Enjoy the life. Yes, God gave us these lives. We enjoy it. God made this creation. Enjoy the creation, yes. But in God-approved ways, of course. And recognize that this world in this life is temporary. Sometimes we say it like this, we're just pilgrims. What does that mean? We're traveling through. This is not a permanent home for us, right? Our permanent place is what awaits after this world is over with. But it's so easy to get distracted by things of this world. Because we live in these physical bodies, in this physical world, and our lives revolve around time. And it's easy to forget that when this world is over with, when time ends, our existence doesn't end. And we'll enter into a place where there is no time. It's just eternity. Where are we going to be in that eternity? But it's so easy to get distracted by things of this world. And our day-to-day routines and responsibilities and all those things. There's nothing wrong with that, but keep it in perspective. Where is our focus? Is it on right now, pleasing this life, ourselves, and other people in this life, or is it in pleasing God and preparing for eternity? Loving God and loving others, other people as well, that means addressing sin. It means addressing false teachings and standing on God's standard no matter what. And that's what Paul's doing right here. There's serious problems in Galatia. It would be very easy for him just to say, it's okay, I love you, and not address the problem. It'd be very easy to do that, and that's what so many people do today. But what's more loving Accepting someone in their sin or trying to help them get out of sin and prepare for eternity? What's more loving? I think the answer to that is obvious. Questions, comments? Notice verse 11. But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached of me is not of man. Now, this is something that we alluded to a moment ago, and I'll go ahead and get verse 12 with it as well, because it gets more specific. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. We alluded to this a moment ago when we're talking about what Paul's message, what he was teaching, was not authoritative just because he said it. He was teaching it by inspiration. It was given to him by the Lord Himself. He had something to remind them of. And that's what I certify you. I'm making known directly to you is the idea. Making this very, very clear to you. They already knew it, but he needed to reinforce it with them. The gospel that he preached was not of human origin. Paul didn't come up with it. Some other man did not come up with it. It was not of human origin. It was preached by me, is not after me, not after any other man. Notice verse 12 now. We already read it. But not only was the gospel Paul preached not of human origin, Paul didn't even receive it. He wasn't even taught it by another man. See, how did we learn the gospel? Well, some man taught us, some person. I mean, I'm using the word man in a broad sense, a person, a human being. Some person taught us. And we might read and study it, of course, but most likely somebody helped teach us. Paul's saying, I didn't even receive the gospel like that. It was given to me directly from the Lord. He's inspired. What is the word? He says by revelation, end of verse 12, it was given to him by the revelation of Jesus Christ. What does that word revelation mean? To make known. You can actually just kind of see the word reveal in it, right? It's to make known. Literally means to uncover. That's what the Greek word literally means, to unveil or uncover. To make known. What it literally is, when he says by the revelation of Jesus Christ, this is an announcement from God of something that lies beyond human understanding by Himself. Without God revealing the gospel, would we know what the gospel... Can we understand that and come up with that? No, that's beyond us. And that's the point. This revelation from God is an announcement, something He's making known to us that we wouldn't know any other way. We cannot know the gospel without God revealing it, and that's what He's done. And now Paul is reinforcing that for these people in Galatia. So don't turn away from it. Don't deny Jesus. He is the Messiah. He is the good news. Don't deny Him. All right, Lord willing, we'll pick up there next time.